to Write. I'm Savy, and today we're going to be talking about bad teen fantasy novels. So if you watched my episode of What Not to Write last time, I talked about writing bad poetry as a preteen, like when I was in middle school. I wrote so much bad poetry because in middle school we all think that we're like these great philosophers in training and that we know life, the universe, and everything. But we don't because we're in middle school. So at this time, when I was in middle school, when I was 14 years old, this would be 8th grade, I decided that I was going to write a fantasy novel. So that turned out even worse than you expect. But the whole point of this show is that we make fun of me, we can make fun of ourselves, and realize that as writers, we have to first be bad before we can be good. So it's okay to make fun of ourselves and to look back on those times and celebrate how far we've come. So, like I said, today I'm going to be talking about the bad fantasy novel I tried to write when I was in 8th grade. So, unfortunately, I can't just do like a straight read through of it because it's in so many different places. It's like in journals that I've written in, some of it's in Microsoft Word, some of it's in Google Docs somehow, some of it's like on my old laptop. It's all over the place. I did find this one journal that I have some of it in, and if you see, it says Shakespeare journal on it. I got this in 8th grade because I was one of those middle school kids who was like, I love Shakespeare, right? Do you know that kind of middle school kid where we're like, Shakespeare's so deep and he's so literary and everything he says just like resonates with me so hard. But like, of course we didn't understand Shakespeare actually because we were in middle school. But that's like my friends and I would go to like Barnes & Noble and look at the like huge 10-pound Shakespeare anthologies and flip through them and be like, oh yeah, I really like relate to Lady Macbeth because even though she's so evil, she's like so conflicted or whatever. Like just stuff that made no sense at all. So I had a Shakespeare journal, and in the Shakespeare journal I wrote what I thought at the time was going to be my greatest work ever, which was my fantasy novel, which turned out to be the worst thing I've ever written. So, some background on this book. This novel is called Valdarin. Valdarin is the name of the magical land where it takes place. So, in this land, everyone who lives there is a leprechaun, right? Because at the time I was like, there's so many novels out there that are about, like, wizards and elves and dragons and all of that, but why not leprechauns? Now, to be clear, I knew nothing about, like, the actual history and mythology surrounding leprechauns and things like that, so this novel never should have been written. I can't emphasize that enough. I was probably the least qualified person, not only to write a fantasy novel, but to write about leprechauns, if there is anyone who's qualified to write a novel like this, which there isn't because it never should have happened. Okay, so what happens in this leprechaun world is that as an adult leprechaun, everyone works in the gold mines, right? So they like work in the gold mines to try to mine all the gold to put in the pot for the end of the rainbow. And then the children leprechauns, when they grow up, when they turn 18, that's when they get married. And the leprechaun weddings happen where, like, the male leprechaun will jump over the rainbow, and there will be a group of female leprechauns waiting at the other side of it, and he gets to pick one and marry her, and she has, like, no say in it whatsoever. It's the most sexist practice possible, but that's because I was actually planning a sequel, and in the sequel, it was going to be all about the leprechaun feminist movement. But fortunately, I never got to the sequel, so we don't have anything that bad existing in the world. I actually never totally finished this novel. So I never finished this, so that's probably for the best. But I was planning that there was going to be a big plot twist at the end, so I had the plot twist ready to go. And I was like, there's going to be this big thing, and no one's going to be expecting it. It's just going to blow everyone's mind, this huge leprechaun plot twist, which I never actually got to write. But at the time, I was like, this plot twist is like my deepest, darkest secret. No one will ever know about the plot twist until they get there. But luckily, no one ever got there. So, on this story itself, there are two main leprechaun characters. They are named Melvin and Lennon, and I named them by Googling Irish names and then picking two at random. So that's how I named my two main characters. And then what's going on in the world around them is that there's like some kind of prophecy happening. So like there's like the leprechaun king, and his name is King Jonathan, I think, and then he dies and his son King Patrick takes over, but then he finds in his father's will that there's like some prophecy that the actual heir to the leprechaun throne is supposed to be the future son of these two main leprechauns, Melvin and Lennon, but they can't have a son because they're both men. So that's like a whole thing, right? But that's honestly, actually, all of that is just the side plot. Like, all of that, the prophecy, the leprechaun political uprising, that was all like side stuff that I barely even touched on, because the main point of this novel was that it was a romance. So I attempted to write a young adult gay leprechaun romance novel. So I'm not surprised it turned out as bad as it did. So when it comes to the angst scale, I would give the story an 8. I can't give it a 10 because it's not as, like, it's bad, but it's not as bad as that poem I read you guys on the previous episode about how, like, nothing in the world really matters and life is a large black void of nothing. Like, this isn't that existentially depressing, but I would still give it an 8 on the angst scale because I do try so hard to be, like, deep and access a higher meaning of the universe the whole time, and you all know how that'll turn out. So, I'll give it an 8. On the scale of how much it's going to make you want to vomit, I would actually give it an 11 out of 10. So it's actually more, like, the romance is more disgusting than the one when I read that poem last time to you guys about that poem I wrote about how I liked Tyler and wanted to hang out with him or whatever. That one was gross, but, like, this romance is even grosser, so get ready for that. So the first thing I'm going to read is one of my attempts at a beginning to this story. This, I guess, is like the prologue of sorts. And it's actually the most, like, philosophical type of opening I had. So, here goes. Amazing as it may seem, on every 4-leaf clover there lives a colony. A colony of leprechauns. Many folks will try to tell you that leprechauns do not exist, but that is only because they are cynics trapped in a closed mind. They think that if they cannot witness something, that it is not there. Funny how people are often wrong, but so strong-willed that they are content with edging through life with incorrect ideas, then learn the truth. Alright, so then after that, the prologue goes on a little bit more. We learn more about Valderin and the background of this world, and then we go into chapter 1. So here, guys, here is chapter 1. What if the only reason you behaved as an individual was that all your friends did? Lennon was the very quintessence of individuality. He held in his heart a key that not only unlocked new secret worlds, but also unlocked the very being inside of him. Throughout the colony of Valderin, there were small villages where each man was told their place and kept it. Melvin's village was the gold mines. Jacob's and his father, Lennon's father, and the fathers of all their neighbors spent their days digging for hope and success, but sadly found only gold. Melvin's father came home from work each night, worn down and unsatisfied. He'd enter their straw-roofed cottage each night with his eyelids falling and teeth angry, telling them of that day's adventures under the ground. Melvin's mother would hold his father's shoulders tightly and whisper encouragement to him, and as his expression slowly softened, the family all relaxed a bit as well. Jacob and Melvin had little to worry about. Their father was away laboring, but they still had a mother to take care of them at home. Lennon had a different story. When he was just a baby, his mother was found dead at the bottom of a river near his cottage. Lennon had always been different from the other leprechauns, not in the sense that he was detrimented in any way, but that he was the peak of all beauty and truth. He stuck out not like a sore thumb, but more like a decorated, attractive thumb. Alright, so then from there we just hear a bunch more stuff about, like, how when the new king is crowned, Melvin and Lennon meet each other when they're 3 years old and they, like, get to know each other and become best friends or whatever. And then we go into the next chapter. Words. Their power is incredible. Sometimes. They were 13 years old, meaning it had been 10 years since they met. Coming home from school one day, the two leprechauns took the scenic route through the park, just because it was a nice day. The sky was a couple shades brighter than Lennon's eyes, and the wind smelt of pine. The grass grew tall, and Melvin and Lennon had to take big strides to step over it. They finally reached a stone trail in the midst of the grass and trees, and they walked. So many lovers abound that day. So many talking sweet words to one another, and those who could not find them strode in silence. 2 leprechauns sitting under a tree, smiling at each other. Jacob and Taranika walking through the grass, hand in hand. Melvin's strides grew shorter. He looked at Lennon and realized that his had done the same. They walked at a slow pace, and at one moment, when the sun shone brightest and the air felt coolest, Melvin turned his head to face Lennon. Lennon turned his head to face Melvin. Blue eyes sparkling, smiles forming, hearts racing. No words exchanged. Alright guys, so that's all I have to read today from my epic leprechaun romance novel. If you guys, for some strange reason, want to hear more of this, I can find, I'll look through my old laptop and my Word documents and some of my other journals and see if I can find more of it to read to you guys. If for some odd reason you want to hear more about these leprechauns who shouldn't exist. But that was today's episode of What Not to Write. If you enjoyed this video, please click the subscribe button so that you can see more examples of my bad writing and examples of things that you guys should be writing, which is the opposite of this. So be sure to tune in a couple days from now for Cice's video, where she will teach you guys how to be super stylish and fashionable and the complete opposite of the type of person who would write a leprechaun fantasy novel in 8th grade. So be sure to watch that because you want to turn out like her, not like me. And I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have any bad fantasy novels that you wrote when you were 14, please email them to me. I'll put my email address in the description. Please send them over to me and I would be happy to read them so that we can make fun of you like we're all making fun of me. Alright guys, I hope that video was enjoyable to you. Happy writing!